It happened during one of the softer moments you two shared. It was late, and you were alone together, cuddling on his bed after a hot day. It was peaceful, and Bakugo was on the verge of sleep when he heard you whisper the sweet word under your breath. I love you. His eyes shot open, and he was met with your flustered face, staring back at him in shock. You thought he had been asleep. What did you just say? He asked you as he stared right into your eyes. He was in disbelief, not that he didn't even admit to it. You watched as you squirmed around from your position on his chest. You hid your face by shoving it into his torso. I said I love you. I thought you were asleep. I'm sorry if it's too soon. I know we've only been dating for a few months. Your voice was drawing out as the sound of his own pounding heartbeat filled his ear. You loved him. His eyes slowly got wider, and the blush on his cheeks growing more and more with each second that you rambled on. He placed a hand on your shoulder and made you look up at him. He heard you suck in a breath as you made eye contact. You were surprisingly even more red than he was. He grabbed your chin between his thumb and index finger before pulling you closer, your noses brushed together. Say it again, he whispered, a laugh softer than before. He didn't realize until that moment how much he had been longing to hear you say those words. I love you. For once, he didn't even try to fight back the smile that made its way to his lips. It was a cocky smile, but a smile not less. He brought you into his arms, squeezing you tightly as he buried his face in your neck. It was one of those hugs that made you feel safe. It was filled with emotion as he cradled you in his arms. He held your head in one of his hands as he pressed a firm kiss on your cheek. He bit his lip as he tried to force the smile away. What had you done to him? It probably looked like such an idiot right now. 3 simple words from you had made him the happiest guy in the world. His hand clenched up at the overwhelming amount of emotion he felt. He had never experienced anything like this. You pulled back from the hug just so you could stare into his eyes again. And that was when he realized he should probably say it back. He tensed up at the thought and huffed. His cheeks were burning as he turned his head away from you. It was so damn embarrassing. He tried to say it back, but instead all that came out was, good, and so you should. He heard you laughing at his response. It confused him, but he was glad you were not pressuring him to say it back. You knew better than anyone that it wasn't going to be that easy for him. You said a quick goodnight before pecking his lip and slowly falling asleep on his chest. He, however, was wide awake now. He stayed awake for a few hours after, petting your hair softly as he watched your peaceful sleeping face. His mouth still ghosted a smile as he replayed those words over and over in his head. What a dumbass. He huffed softly through his nose as he brushed the way away from your forehead. What a dumbass. He huffed softly through his nose as he brushed the hair away from your forehead and pressed a kiss to it. You were too damn good for him. I love you too, he whispered into your ear. I really, really do. You two were out at the Heroes Museum when it happened. He was off on his ramble again, talking about how each hero and how he admired them in all different ways. You didn't even have to read the plaque. You practically have your own tour guide. He was in his zone, and you couldn't help but admire how cute he was. His hands was firmly gripped onto yours as you walked beside him, listening to every word. After a while, he noticed you were staring at him with a love-struck gaze and a big goofy smile on your lips. He immediately got embarrassed and sunk his face into his jacket. "What is it? Was I talking too much again?" You shake your head and you watch as you took a step forwards, brushing some stray hair behind his ear before meeting his big green eyes. "No, I was just thinking about how much I love you." There it was. He sucked in a deep breath as you had knocked all the oxygen out of his lungs. Subconsciously, his hands tightened around yours as his heart filled with the unknown feeling. It felt like he was about to explode. He barely held back the small whimper of joy as his heart clenched in his chest. You loved him? You really loved him? He pressed his hand over his heart, trying to calm it down. His face was burning so much he thought he might faint. You made his legs go weak as your words struck him right through the heart. You were too cute. I love you too," he squeaked out in embarrassment. It didn't help that you two were in public either. He wished he could say it back as sweetly and confidently as you had, but it only came out rushed and embarrassed. He heard you giggle happily at his reaction before placing a kiss on the top of his head. "So, what were you saying about this hero?" He tried his best to act like nothing had happened, like it wasn't such a big deal to him, but he couldn't. He could barely speak afterwards. His mind was too preoccupied with replaying those words in his head. It was safe to say he had successfully embarrassed himself several times by stuttering over his word and walking into things. It was like he was in a dream, induced daze for the rest of the day. He was just glad his legs were still functioning. The poor boy really hadn't been ready. Even after you did hand in and walked you home, all he could think about was how you had said it with such confidence. It was too sincere, and it had melted his heart right through the core. At the end of the day, he collapsed onto his bed, pushing his still burning red face into his pillow. "They loved me," he whispered happily, tears pricking at his eyes. He was so happy, he felt like the luckiest guy in the world. There's 100% chance that he was going to think about that moment every second of every day for at least the next 3 weeks.